China has effectively cut off Intel from its massive consumer base in a move that has sent shockwaves through global markets. This has triggered a staggering $100 billion loss overnight. This isn't just some random corporate setback. This is a game changer, a seismic shift that could flip the entire global tech balance on its head. In an instant, the king of semiconductors became the pawn in a high-stakes tech war, and the shockwaves are still reverberating. But here's where it gets even crazier. President Donald Trump's hardline policies toward China may have set the stage for this very moment. With tariffs, sanctions, and an all-out trade war, Trump was hell-bent on curbing China's rise. But now, China's strike on Intel has shown just how far they've come and are willing to go even further. And it's not just a corporate punch, it's a strategic, calculated move that alters the future of tech. So how did China execute such a devastating blow that landed Intel in a $100 billion loss? And what does this mean for Intel, for America, and for the future of tech innovation? Buckle up, let's find out. China's shift in policy. For months, China has been steadily tightening its grip on tech access, but now the gloves are off. In a move that sent a chill through Silicon Valley, Beijing expanded its policies to sideline US semiconductor giants like Intel, AMD, and Micron from critical sectors. This wasn't a bombastic announcement, it was a cold, calculated pivot framed under the guise of digital sovereignty. In short, China wants full control over its tech destiny, no foreign strings attached. By pushing out American tech, China is safeguarding its infrastructure, from telecommunications to artificial intelligence, from foreign surveillance or pressure. Supply chains are being restructured, alliances are shifting, and the message is clear. China is done playing second fiddle in the semiconductor race. And let's be clear, this wasn't just about dollars and cents. Cutting out Intel and other US giants from critical systems is a long-term strategic move. The Chinese leadership views tech dominance as a matter of national security. Dependence on American chips meant leaving themselves vulnerable to blackmail, something they're no longer willing to risk. By investing heavily in homegrown alternatives and slamming the door on US firms, China is betting it can not only survive without American tech, it can lead the next wave of global innovation. This isn't just retaliation for past trade wars. This is a calculated attempt to build an entirely separate tech ecosystem, one where the US doesn't even get a seat at the table. Intel felt the punch first, and hard. Losing $100 billion in market cap overnight is catastrophic by any standard, but Intel's loss was just the beginning. The ripple effects shot through the entire US tech sector. Stocks plunged, confidence cracked. Suddenly, companies that once seemed untouchable were exposed as vulnerable to foreign policy swings. Investors scrambled to reassess risk, while US allies in Europe and Asia found themselves stuck in the middle, wondering if they, too, would be collateral damage. Meanwhile, China moved fast to shore up local alternatives, handing massive boosts to homegrown chip makers. It's not just a market disruption, it's a geopolitical earthquake that's shaking the foundations of tech alliances worldwide. But how exactly did we get here? To understand why Intel, and by extension America's tech dominance, is now hanging by a thread, we have to rewind to the era when Trump's hardball tactics with China kicked off a chain reaction no one can stop. Trump's gamble, how past policies set the stage. The truth is, today's $100 billion disaster wasn't born overnight. It's the product of a tech Cold War that's been brewing for years. A war that Donald Trump recklessly escalated. Trump made it clear America was done letting China gobble up US tech secrets and dominate supply chains without a fight. Tariffs, blacklists, and sanctions started flying. Companies like Huawei were boxed out of critical markets. Chinese firms lost access to American-designed chips, software, and high-end manufacturing tools. At the time, many hailed it as a bold move, a long overdue stand against China's unfair trade practices. And in the short term, it worked. Chinese tech firms scrambled, some even on the verge of collapse. But beneath the surface, a far more dangerous shift was happening. China wasn't folding, it was preparing for revenge. Rather than back down, China doubled down. Billions were funneled into semiconductor R&D. Entire supply chains were redesigned to cut out American dependence. New policies were drafted to harden China's tech backbone against foreign pressure. It wasn't just about surviving Trump's trade war, it was about ensuring that next time, they'd be untouchable. Fast forward to today, and that strategy is was finally bearing fruit. When China dropped the hammer on Intel, they weren't just retaliating, they were unveiling years of careful planning designed to hit America where it hurts most. And so Trump did not see this coming. His tactics achieved the opposite of what he intended. Instead of crippling China's tech ambitions or isolating Chinese firms to accelerated them, pushing China into becoming more self-sufficient and more aggressive. This brings us straight into a new era of tech warfare that's no longer being fought on America's terms. And what have the casualties been? Let's see, starting with Intel. The consequences for Intel and the US semiconductor industry. Intel wasn't just another domino waiting to fall, it was the skyscraper everyone thought was too big to bring down. For decades, Intel stood as the beating heart of America's tech supremacy, the chip giant whose silicon touched everything from personal computers to massive cloud servers. When China slammed the door shut, it ripped a hole through its very foundation. But the question is why and how China backing out could shatter a company so much. For years, Intel thrived on the Chinese market. At its peak, over 25% of Intel's annual revenue flowed directly from China. It wasn't just about sales, it was about strategic positioning. China's rapid tech expansion meant endless demand for data centers, AI chips, and personal computing solutions, areas where Intel dominated. But this dependence turned out to be a ticking time bomb. As Intel bet bigger on Chinese growth, it exposed itself to Beijing's tightening grip. Worse yet, Intel's own structural problems, manufacturing delays, fierce competition from AMD, a slow pivot to mobile technologies, left it weakened just when it needed strength most. When China made its move, Intel wasn't ready. It was over-leveraged, slow to adapt, and terrifyingly exposed. And so when China made the bold move of cutting off access, a company once valued at over $250 billion lost nearly half its market cap overnight. Intel, the bedrock of global computing, suddenly looked fragile, vulnerable, and worst of all, replaceable. For Wall Street and Silicon Valley alike, it was a thunderclap. If Intel could fall, no one was safe. But that was not the only thing they had to worry about. Intel's collapse didn't happen in a vacuum. Other American semiconductor powerhouses like AMD, Nvidia, and Micron felt the tremors immediately. Stocks dipped, supply chains frayed, overseas partnerships wobbled. Suddenly, US firms had to grapple with a chilling new reality. The Chinese market, once a goldmine, could turn hostile overnight. The broader US tech ecosystem, already straining under chip shortages, geopolitical tensions, and tightening regulations, now faces a bigger threat. If China can effectively cut off one of America's most iconic companies, what's stopping it from doing the same to others? In one brutal move, China shattered the illusion of untouchable US tech dominance. But if Intel's fall is shaking up the semiconductor world, the bigger shockwave is still gathering strength, and it's something the US has not prepared for. China had a more dangerous plan to complete its takeover. View. The Chinese playbook, building a parallel tech ecosystem. While the West was busy basking in decades of tech dominance, China was quietly drawing up a blueprint for revolution. For years, warnings floated around. China wanted its own semiconductor empire. Now, with the Intel cutoff, it's clear. China's playbook wasn't just theory, it's live, and it's working. Beijing knew it couldn't rely on American tech forever. Starting as early as the late 2000s, China began throwing billions into homegrown semiconductor development. Companies like SMIC, Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, were seeded, nurtured, and aggressively protected. Meanwhile, the government poured cash into R&D, trained engineers, and scoured the globe for technical expertise. And the goal wasn't modest. China wasn't trying to be competitive. It was trying to be independent. Every year brought leaps in fabrication capabilities, chip design, and material science. 10 years ago, SMIC was considered a laggard. Today, it's cranking out 7nm chips. Tech that just a few years ago was considered cutting edge even by Western standards. China didn't just build factories, it built the future. While America got comfortable, China got serious. Now, Beijing's arsenal of domestic companies is reaching critical mass, ready to pull the plug on US tech dependencies when it hurts the most. But here comes the bigger game plan, the Clean Silicon Policy. The Clean Silicon Initiative is China's strategic directive to purge American semiconductors from its critical infrastructure by 2027. This isn't about politics anymore, but sovereignty. It's a bold attempt at creating a world where Chinese data centers, telecom networks, and AI platforms are completely off limits to US chip makers. That's the future Beijing is barreling toward, and fast. For Intel, AMD, Nvidia, and others, this spells long-term isolation from the biggest growth market on Earth, billions in potential revenue, evaporated, and once China achieves full self-reliance, it won't just stop at cutting off US companies. It will likely export its own tech across the developing world, challenging US dominance in markets that America once considered safe territory. Two names loom largest in China's semiconductor charge, SMIC and Huawei. SMIC, once seen as a mere assembler of basic chips, has fast-tracked its capabilities beyond what many Western analysts thought possible. Despite facing brutal US sanctions, it's managed to not only survive but thrive, working with new fabrication techniques and indigenous designs that bypass traditional bottlenecks. And Huawei, after being blacklisted and battered by sanctions, it pulled off the seemingly impossible, creating high-performance smartphones using chips built entirely without US technology. The Mate 60 Pro wasn't just a product, it was a statement, a proof of concept that the West's chokehold was weakening. And so if Huawei can make such a bounce back, imagine what China's entire semiconductor army can do next. But here's the chilling part, it's not just about chips anymore. As China builds a parallel tech universe, America isn't just losing market share, it's losing influence, security, and control. And that leads us to the next front in this war that's already heating up. Trump's panic, the strategic implications, and geopolitical consequences. Loss of $100 billion overnight isn't just a financial disaster, it's a wake-up call. And for former President Donald Trump, who is locked in a tech and trade war with China, it hits especially close to home. Trump's approach to China was always aggressive, tariffs, blacklists, and pressure campaigns designed to curb Beijing's rise. But while the headlines celebrated short-term wins, the long-term reality was brewing beneath the surface. China didn't retreat, it adapted. Now, with Intel reeling, Trump's legacy faces a hard question. Did his strategy push China to build the very tech independence that now threatens US dominance? China's decision to cut off major US tech firms signals a clear intent. Tech sovereignty first, global alliances second. This isn't just about Intel or even the broader semiconductor industry. It's about reshaping global influence through technology. Other nations are paying close attention. Countries heavily reliant on US tech are reassessing their vulnerabilities. Emerging powers might view China's model as a safer long-term bet. The old tech alliances, rooted in a US-led internet and chip supply chain, are now at risk of fragmenting. As the trend continues, we could see a global tech divide deepen, a Western-led bloc versus a China-centered alternative. The semiconductor industry is now a battlefield, not just for profits, but for strategic control. The US faces urgent questions. Can it rebuild domestic chip capacity fast enough? Can it rally allies to hold ground against China's expanding tech empire? The choices made in the next 5 to 10 years will shape not just who leads in semiconductors, but who leads the next wave of global innovation itself. Intel isn't taking this lying down. Emergency board meetings have lit up, government support is being courted, and CEO Pat Gelsinger is racing to reposition Intel for survival. The company is doubling down on its US manufacturing investments, pivoting toward defense contracts, and rushing new innovations in AI and quantum computing. Washington is also stepping in. With the CHIPS Act already pumping billions into domestic semiconductor production, Intel is poised to grab a lifeline. But the road back won't be easy. The Chinese market isn't something you can just replace overnight, and trust, both with investors and global partners, has been badly shaken. Even more troubling, Intel's rivals aren't standing still. AMD and Nvidia are hungry. New players in Asia and Europe smell blood. The question isn't just whether Intel can recover, it's whether it can still matter in the next generation of tech. Facing a shrinking market share, a heavy loss in valuation, geopolitical headwinds, and aggressive Chinese competitors, Intel stands at a crossroads. The company is racing to open new fabs in Arizona and Ohio, betting that homegrown innovation can offset overseas losses. But building factories takes years, and China's tech machine isn't slowing down in the meantime. But the bigger challenge? Talent, supply chains, and global partnerships have been deeply entangled with China for decades. Untangling them without collapsing under the weight of higher costs and delays will test Intel and the broader US tech sector like never before. There's still a path to recovery, but it demands something American tech hasn't needed in a long time: real resilience. Whether Intel can reinvent itself quickly enough to survive this new world order remains the billion-dollar question. Because in this new era, it's not just about winning contracts, it's about surviving the tech war itself. But if China can bring Intel to its knees, who's next? And more importantly, what happens when the world's next generation of innovation no longer runs through America?